Britain has officially rejoined the merry-go-round, and yesterday's Unite the Kingdom protest in London offered a front row seat to watch it spin. False narratives were in motion even before the message was being delivered. Twitter was ablaze with claims that this was the UK's largest protest ever. Some accounts even suggested that 3 million people were crammed into Waterloo and Whitehall. Others were disgusted by the BBC for merely reporting police figures, which were closer to 110,000. But that's all part of a leftist agenda, you see. They need to pretend the rally wasn't nearly as popular as it was. But they didn't notice that GB News were also in cahoots with the left in this scheme, they themselves only giving a slightly more generous figure of 150k, nowhere near the whale-sized crowd some were adamantly claiming. Stephen Bartlett was particularly impressed. After 25 years of living in London, he tweeted, he'd never seen anything like it. Stephen must have simply missed the 2003 Iraq War protests, or the 2018 People's Vote marches, or even the Palestinian Solidarity Rally, events with attendance figures that dwarf all those seen yesterday. Numbers aside, the rally did surpass predictions, boosted in part by the tragic killing of Charlie Kirk earlier this week. But this protest wasn't about Kirk. It had been planned long before. The backdrop for this spectacle is the UK's own political climate, which at present revolves almost solely around illegal immigration. Boat crossings from France via the English Channel have skyrocketed, from fewer than 100 per year in the 2010s to over 40,000 in the early 2020s. And yes, the spike coming straight after 2019 is no coincidence, but we'll circle back to that later. At the centre of the stage, of course, was Tommy Robinson, or whatever name he's going by these days. Robinson's speech was a textbook demonstration of how populist speakers love to boom on about free speech, while simultaneously saying fuck all. He too claimed it was the biggest protest in UK history. He told the crowd that they were part of a counter-revolution. He complained about politicians cowering in Westminster, and insisted that the rights of Afghans and Pakistanis had superseded those of British citizens, without ever specifying which rights he was referring to. Vagueness is the eternal theme from the upper right corner of politics. Britain, he says, has finally awoken, forgetting perhaps the 2018 Day of Freedom rally Tommy also organised. That too defended free speech, with promotional posters showing the speakers gagged with masking tape, placed onto their faces by no one but themselves. The theme of free speech reappeared yesterday, and Robinson loudly claimed he is being silenced. And who would deny him? The poor lad has been arrested 11 times, just never actually for his speech. His 11 arrests range from assaulting civilians, assaulting police officers, mortgage and passport fraud, contempt of court, and libel and harassment charges. The truth is, whenever he faces legal trouble unrelated to his opinions, a rally is promptly called to defend his right to speak, and thus his own merry-go-round spins, with all proud patriotic Britons invited for the ride. Robinson was not alone. Elon Musk addressed London via a Zoom call to declare that the left is the party of murder, and Parliament should be dissolved. Common sense advice from a man who mere months ago inadvertently revealed he spent years in bed with the president mentioned in the Epstein files. Katie Hopkins and Lawrence Fox made token appearances, as did French extremist Eric Zemmour, who delivered a lesson in the Great Replacement theory, claiming Britain and France were being colonised by their former colonies. And notably absent, Nigel Farage, which is particularly telling since when Farage declines to attend a nationalist rally, that's a strong indicator of exactly how far right that rally is. Turning Point saw those who labelled the protest as far-right and were simply disgusted given how, according to them, simply calling a movement far-right is an incitement to violence against it. The same way calling Kirk a racist inevitably led to his assassination. To top it all off, the peaceful free speech advocates welcomed counter-protesters to the marketplace of ideas by peacefully forcing their way through the barriers to respectfully express their opinions, using only the most hard-hitting arguments and fistfuls of facts. Messages of the need for respectful disagreement was inside glass bottles which flew overhead, and the common sense crowd were even kind enough to explain their views to stewards and police, injuring 26 officers in the process. So the question needs to be asked, what was the substance? Why were they here? Well, Robinson referenced the Epping case, where apparently local calls to stop housing migrants in a local hotel had been ignored simply to appease the comfort of illegal immigrants. But it's worth examining the details more closely here. The Bell Hotel, under contract with the Home Office, was being used to accommodate asylum seekers. Local residents and the District Council raised genuine concerns, including allegations of sexual assault by some of those staying there. However, the legal dispute raised by the council had nothing to do with any of that. It was all about planning permission. The council argued that the hotel's use in this way required specific approval, which it lacked. The High Court initially granted an interim injunction to pause asylum housing at the hotel until the dispute was resolved. But the Court of Appeal later overturned that injunction, citing procedural errors in invoking the injunction and concerns about public safety, rendering the ruling against the hotel illegitimate. The case is still ongoing, it's just that the temporary injunction has been lifted until it's resolved, and suitable alternative accommodation can be provided. But legal nuance doesn't make for a good slogan now, does it? So the rally must present the case in dramatic, oversimplified terms, framing it as foreigners' rights are the British rights, and that's the tactic. Report events with a framing that deliberately ignores the legal context and all the complexities the authorities need to navigate, and that expands to the macro level too. We could ask why the hotels are being repurposed for asylum seekers in the first place. Well, since 2019, the illegal boat crossings have surged. There's no prizes for guessing what significant event it was in 2019 that triggered such a problem. The very thing most of these protesters have been passionately fighting for and won played a significant role. Brexit meant Brexit, and Brexit also meant leaving the Dublin regulation, which had allowed the UK to return irregular migrants back to the continent. Brexit meant there's no automatic return process, no quick resolution, just a slow and legally constrained system which makes a country quite an attractive target for those wanting in. Hostile origin countries such as Afghanistan further complicate things, making forced returns especially difficult for vulnerable families. Even at historically modest numbers, the backlog of claims, combined with ethical and legal obligations, makes large-scale deportation logistically impossible. Thus, Britain has to face a problem it didn't before. Unprepared to accommodate such a large number of people in suitable centres whilst they're being processed, the government has had to turn to hotels. Whilst it may sound comfortable living in a 4-star hotel for nothing, the reality is that its rooms are converted from luxury spaces into dormitories, sometimes holding multiple families. Food is served not on silver platters, but in brown paper bags containing a sandwich, some fruit, a bottle of water, and perhaps a yogurt if you're lucky. Robinson's rhetoric glosses over these structural realities. He and his allies portray the crisis as one created by a political elite who simply despise the indigenous British for no reason whatsoever. However, many of the underlying challenges stem from the events set in motion by those in his own political orbit. But of course, none of this nuance is acknowledged. Instead, Robinson presents a distorted narrative that assigns blame where it's politically convenient rather than where it's accurate. But what does accuracy matter when you can just be furious instead? No, forget the difficulties imposed by backlogs and Brexit. No, forget how boat crossings have actually reduced dramatically under Labour. No, forget how the one-in, one-out deal with France has helped keep crossings low. Britain is being invaded and the left want you dead and we're all being silenced, and on it goes. Yesterday's rally was less about solutions and all about theatrics, a recurring pattern. The merry-go-round spins again. Exaggeration, slogans, outrage, spectacle, exaggeration, slogans, outrage, spectacle, and a complete absence of substance. For those watching, it's a familiar ride, and much like any carnival attraction, it's quite entertaining, until reality reminds us it's all going in circles.